Hey y'all, welcome back to No Melanin Talks. Today we are talking about the 5 biggest misconceptions about visually impaired people. I have been living this life for quite some time. I've been visually impaired my whole entire life. So when I tell you I know. And I'm sure that some of you can relate. Y'all probably are like, girl. So if you're ready, grab your popcorn, grab your drink, let's sit down and let's talk about these misconceptions. Let's go. And number 1 is the misconception that just because we're visually impaired, we're unable to drive. I remember this being such a big thing when I was growing up. Like, will you be able to drive? Are you able to drive? Because obviously, as an albino, I have visual impairment, and other people have visual impairment for other reasons as well. Everyone that's an albino or a person with albinism, it doesn't mean that we're the only ones with visual impairment. There are other people who have visual impairment as well. However, society, the environment you grow up in, it matters. It does. It can either make or break you, shape you, or shame you. So in my environment, that was a very big obsession, was knowing or trying to see if I would be able to drive because I am like this. And so I remember wondering if I would be able to, because I knew that my vision was poor. I knew going to doctor's offices what the doctors would say to my mother when I would fail vision tests, pretty much, so to speak. I could only see past a certain line, and that wasn't very favorable. That wasn't very good. I had all of those things to consider. I have to say this, everyone, just because we have a visual impairment, it doesn't mean that we all see at the same range or we all have the same visual acuity. Like, that's not the truth for that. And I feel like that is a lot of where that opinion about us stems from, because when people see visual impairment, they just think we all see the same way, the same rate, and we don't. That is why for us, we have to get our doctor's consent before we can receive or obtain a driver's license. I know for people without a visual impairment, once you finish training for driving, be it from your parents or you go take a course, you're able to go to the DMV and obtain your license. You take the vision test, boom, you're out on the road. But for us, it's different because we do have low vision. It's not normal. We have to get our doctor's consent, and because they know our eyes, they have to tell the DMV basically what they feel is safe for us to do on the road. So we have to drive, but we drive with restrictions. Everyone's restrictions are not the same, but one of the ones that I can tell you we have to do is wear corrective lenses. That's a must. Also, for some of us, we might not drive on highways or freeways. We might not be able to drive at night. It's certain restrictions that we have to adhere to that can be found on our driver's licenses. However, that comes from our doctor. If our doctor doesn't approve of us being out on the road and getting a license, we won't get a license, because we can't go to the DMV and take the vision test, like the normal vision test that you or someone else without a visual impairment would take. We're unable to take that test. So we have to get a specialized letter from our doctor's office stating that we can do it. However, it can be done. It just depends on the doctor and what he or she feels we can do out on the road. It's nothing else outside of that. So when you hear those things or those types of messages being said, it really causes you to wonder. And like I said, I remember growing up wondering if there was going to be something that I would be able to do just because of the environment that I was in. I was of the opinion that, well, we all wouldn't be able to do something like that. But it wasn't until I started going to the eye doctor that I mentioned in the previous video about me driving. By the way, y'all check that out, where he was able to explain that in a better, detailed way, much more detailed way, that this was something that could be done, obviously with limitations, obviously with modifications, but that it was something that could be done for me. I can't speak for everyone else, but yes, I do know of other visually impaired people who drive in other states and other countries. It's definitely a thing. That has to be like the number 3 biggest misconception right there, is that visually impaired people cannot drive. Most of us might not be able to, but even then, I don't know the numbers. There might be a lot of us who do drive, but within that pool of visually impaired people, there are some of us who are able to drive, again, just with our eye doctor's consent, that letter telling us that we can. That's what we need, and that's what gets us out on the road. So that is number 3. Number 2 will have to be that we always have to wear our eyeglasses in order to see. Now, for visually impaired people like myself, we can see, but then we need that extra aid. We need that extra layer of of oomph to really cause us to see a little bit better than we would normally see without our eyeglasses. And I remember growing up, people, if they would see me without my eyeglasses, they would immediately respond with, "Oh, you should be wearing your glasses. You should be wearing your glasses." And I'm like, I can see. I mean, I can see, but I can't see. And I guess maybe for them, because they weren't accustomed to it, they didn't get it. They didn't understand how you can see, but then how you also at the same time can't really see. So there was this thing of like, we just had to make sure we had our eyeglasses on because that was the only way anything would be done. And that's a misconception. No, I can't see 20/20, but I can still see. Even with my eyeglasses on, my vision is not perfected, but I can still see. So it's not a requirement that I just have to have my eyeglasses on at all times in order to be able to see where I'm walking to. There's a such thing as memorization. There's a such thing as familiarity. And visually impaired people, if you know, you know. When you're at home, you probably never wear your eyeglasses unless you're like watching TV or reading a book, because we learn how to see with our hands. We learn how to see with touching things. There are certain ways that we train our brain to navigate through rooms, people, the way we learn faces. It's all in a very specialized way that I don't think I can articulate. It's just one of those if you know, you know type of things, but that's how we see. We see without seeing. Like, we have ways to get around what these eyes are unable to do. We have ways to get around it. It might not make sense to you again if you are not visually impaired and you're like, what is she talking about? Well, you just take my word for it. We see in other ways. We see with what we're touching, with what we're feeling, with what we're sensing, with the images that our brain is able to cultivate and put together. We see in those types of ways, which again can be uncommon for a lot of people, but it works for us. It helps us get around. I memorize a lot, especially if I'm in a new area. I always look for markers. I always look for things that will help me memorize, and it works. So I can't really, like I said, if I try to articulate it, it probably won't come out correctly, but if you know, you know. So I'll just leave it at that. So that's number 2. We don't always have to be wearing our eyeglasses. We have other methods and other ways of seeing, but when we do wear our eyeglasses, it's generally for things like, for those of us that drive, if we're driving, we're wearing them for that. We're reading, but even still, you'll see us squinting with our eyeglasses on because they don't perfect our vision. They enhance it to a certain extent, but I can't explain it to y'all. Y'all not gonna get it. Let's move on to number 1. I cannot tell y'all, even today, I had someone say this to me last week, y'all. They were like, "You can't see that?" They were like, "You can't see that?" And I'm like, "No, if I can see it, I wouldn't be sitting this close." I was sitting at the computer and y'all, I was thirsty. I was sitting at the computer and someone was like, "Oh, you're sitting close to the computer." Like, I didn't even know you were in here. They thought my chair was pushed up underneath. The table is like all the way pushed up. So they didn't know that I was in this particular room, that I was sitting there on the computer. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, you have to sit that close to the computer?" And I was like, I do. When it comes to computers and technology, thankfully we have zoom in features. Like, I love using Google Chrome. Unshameable plug. I love using Google Chrome and other features to help me. I have a magnifying glass and different things that I use to navigate around, but even still, I have to squint. Even still, I have to sit like all the way up. My vision is blurry at best. You know, if it's pretty large things, I can see it, but if it depends. This is another one of those things where I really can't articulate it, but if you know, you know. And that is why people, like even watching TV, when I was a kid, I'd sit on the floor and I would watch TV, and I would have people say, "Why are you on the floor? Why are you sitting so close to the TV?" Because they didn't get it. And I'm talking about peers. People in my age group are a little bit older. They didn't get it why someone like me had to sit on the floor and watch TV, and I wasn't sitting on the couch or in a chair watching it from like a longer distance in the back. That was because I couldn't see, and the best way to see was sitting like really close to the TV. For some of us who are visually impaired, just like I said earlier with the driving, not everyone who's visually impaired does this, but to have to do it, we have to do it. And it makes sense to us. It might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to us, and that's how we get around, and that's how we're able to live our lives, and that's how we're able to do what we do. So y'all, those were my top 3 biggest misconceptions about being visually impaired. Not being able to drive, wearing eyeglasses, always asking us, "You can't see that?" all the time. So if you have any more to add to what I already said, add. I know we have stories for days. Just share your experiences. If I got into storytelling, this video would be much longer than it already is. That's why I have to cut it short. And I decided to do 3 instead of 2 because we would be here all day. The stories that I have, Lord Jesus, they go for days. I hope that you found time to laugh, and hopefully you're able to relate, and hopefully we can just continue being in this visual impairment journey together. Y'all see, I'm keeping my word. I told y'all I was gonna be on here more, and guess what? Look at me, I'm on here more. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask me, not necessarily on here, shoot me an email at nomelaninskin@gmail.com. You can also direct message me on Facebook and Instagram at nomelanin. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I will see y'all soon. In the meantime, catch up on all No Melanin's content, catch up on No Melanin Talks, catch up on the most recent video that I put up, visually impaired driving. Oh my gosh, y'all, we're doing some big things over here. I'm like, who is this? Who is she? Doing all of this vision and driving and YouTube and stuff. Who is she? She is me. I am Janessa. I'm leaving. I'm on my lunch break and I gotta get back to work. Bye.